Hey, it's Jeff from study.com. I want you to hear this story from Sim. He started college, but like a lot of people, life got in the way. And maybe that happened to you too. Sim pivoted and became a firefighter, but then later on, many years later, he decided to go back and get that degree. This is such a powerful story, but it's also, I think, incredibly relatable. So let's get to his story. One quick note before we do. We fit this chat in between emergency calls. So he is very much an active firefighter, and near the end, he gets another emergency call. So it ends a little bit abruptly. But with that said, here's the chat. Hope you enjoy it. First of all, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule between calls to chat. I want to jump back to kind of earlier in your life and your education experience and start just by asking when you think back to high school, what kind of student were you in high school?
So for me in high school, I was an athlete, but I really took pride in doing well in school. So I was the firstborn on my mother's side, so I had two sisters underneath me. So part of me wanting to do well in education was making sure I set a pathway for my two sisters who were underneath me. So I really did really well. I took honors classes. I did a lot of things. Fortunately, I was able to run track and I was pretty good at it. And I got a track scholarship to Cal State Fullerton. So my freshman and sophomore year, I was at Cal State Fullerton. And then life began lifing for me to where,
Sure.
things tended to change in the direction of how coaching, track, school, all of that kind of came about. I then decided to pursue what my father does or is retired doing, was a firefighter. So came out to Arizona and actively started pursuing that. So school then became kind of a back burner at the point, and I started pursuing after my career, which gratefully so I've been in. But as far as a student in high school, I really applied myself. Graduated, I believe, with a 3.7 GPA.
Okay.
So it wasn't anything like I just wasn't able to. But I will tell you, I was the first to decide to ever go to college. So I
Okay.
think the weight of that amongst my cousins, amongst everything, I was the oldest and I was the first one to ever go to college. And so I think not having any kind of direction on what college was like, I was unprepared. I didn't have enough for somebody to sit me down and say, "Hey, this is how this thing is going to go." So there were times in classes, like I shared the story and I'll be quick, but I went in my freshman year and I was sitting down with my academic counselor, and because I was an athlete, they sit you down with specific counselors and they kind of try to get you on the path of like, "Hey, what's going to be the less easiest path of resistance so that you're eligible to continue doing your sport?"
Right.
And my senior year of high school, I did microbiology and I loved microbiology. It was probably one of the best classes that I had. And so going forward as a 17-year-old, soon to be 18 going to college, I was like, you know what? I want to be a microbiology major. And so I remember sitting down with my academic counselor and I said, I want to major in microbiology as a freshman. And he kind of looked at me and he said, "Are you sure you want to be a microbiology major?" I said, "No, absolutely. This is great. I want to, I want to do this." And he was like, you sure you just don't want to do your GEs, the first 2 years, and then, then you'll determine by then 2 years, you'll determine what major you want to do." Nope, nope. I'm a Taurus, hell bent. I'm digging in the sand. I am going to be a microbiology major. He was like, "Hey, with your track schedule, this is going to be a little bit hard." I was like, "I can do it." I take microbiome 101, instantly realized I don't want to be a microbiology major anymore.
Yeah.
So, oh, little, and how fast did I know? And then I changed to communication, which I think if I would have changed to a history major, I probably would have been a little bit better since history is my jam as well. But yeah, long story short, I just didn't have any really good direction when
Yeah.
I got to school on how some of that stuff happened. But yeah, like I said, after kind of my sophomore year, I started coming out and actively pursuing getting to the fire department, and that's kind of what drove me down this path.
Well, and yeah, like you said, I think it's important to come back to that. It's hard when you are the first or one of the first in your family to do this. You don't have many people in your family to turn to who've kind of modeled it for you.
Yeah.
And it is hard to be the first. But so, okay, so you took this detour and that lasted for what, about more than 10 years, right? Where you're
Yeah, a
working.
little bit over 10 years because I graduated high school in '99. and roughly about 2000, going into 2001. So after, I want to say after 9/11, I was still, no, I was still in school. So 2002-ish is when all that happened. So yeah, and then
Okay.
I started pursuing this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so you came back to getting a bachelor's degree,
hmm
and maybe can you just share like why did that matter to you? Why was it important?
it's super. There's many reasons why it was super important, but probably the main reason is one, self-fulfillment for me, right? I started something years ago that I didn't get a chance to complete, and it was something that it meant a lot to me to get done. And I had always in my head had looked at time of like, hey, when was I going to complete it? Go back and I kind of toyed around, looked at some schools, looked at some things, but I never kind of pulled the trigger. I think for me, when I had my first daughter, when she was about to be born, I've really sat down and started really thinking about like, hey, I want to get this complete. I want to do this for me. Then I had my second daughter, right? And it started to get like, hey man, you got to make this thing happen. And then there was a story here at work by one of my chiefs who actually just got 30 years on the job today. So
Oh
it's
wow.
kind of fulfilling. But he had mentioned something that was really, really inspirational to me that made me said, okay, you got to get this done. But he had mentioned that his mother had required everyone in their household to at least get their bachelor's degree. He said, so we didn't do any celebrations for high school. He said it was mandated to do they had to do their bachelor's degree. She held them to this standard because she said that's the real celebration is after you get your degree, and then we'll celebrate. Even to the point where his father, who didn't have his degree, she had him go back to school and he accomplished his degree. And so from this point on, everyone in their family had their degree. Some even went on to get their masters and things like that. But it was just kind of a standard held. And I really respected that because it was at a point, my daughter's mother has her degree in nursing. And then, you got dad here who is doing well, is in the fire department,
Yeah.
but I was like, I want to be able to have a standard to where my daughters have to achieve. So, I want to say, yeah, high school graduation is cool, but that's kind of something that is mandated. In state law, you got to go to school until
Sure. Yeah.
you know, but college is a choice and getting education. And one thing I've come to know is that knowledge truly is power. And the more you know, the better you are. It opens you up to see things differently, right? And I mean, we're not always going to see everything the same way across the board, everyone, but it allows you just to expand your mind a little bit more from beyond what it is. And so that kind of was the inspiration to be able to tell my daughters when they come to that point to like, hey, listen, high school graduation is going to be great and I'm happy for you, but we're not celebrating that because
Yeah.
that's something you got to do. I want to get you to a level where you're getting your doctorate degree or your master's or whatever that may be. But I want to set that bar and I want to have that standard for my family.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how you did it. So let's talk about the study.com part first. So you took a bunch of courses on study.com, earned a bunch of credit there. What was that experience like for you? So coming to college coursework, doing it in this way, what was that like?
You know what? I honestly got to say, I really enjoyed it. And the reason why I say that is, as you saw me on the fire truck a little bit earlier, I'd be in the back seat. I'd pull up my phone and I'd be on my study.com and I'd take courses while I was in the back of a fire truck, just sitting around driving, right?
Yeah.
So what I really enjoyed about it is truly the flexibility. I'd go on family vacation and I'd pull up and I'd have to get my classes done and things like that. And what was really cool, it was really inviting, really fun, but it was very challenging, right? I think I had more papers that I had to actively write, to where all of a sudden I'm writing, I'm doing MLS, APA, Chicago style writing. I'm doing all these
Yeah.
several different forms of writing, and I'm like, oh my God, what the MLA format? Okay, now I got to do APA format, then I got to do Chicago style. But it challenged me in that ability to where now those three, I'll be quite honest with you. I mean, I remember vaguely some of the writing styles in college, but again, that was years ago to where now it was a little bit to where I was like, okay, hey, this is good. But it was really a great experience. I mean, at first, when you first get it and you send over your transfers, you say, hey, this is all I got. And they say, yeah, that's good. You only got a few classes. And then you look and you go, like, oh my God, I got more. But the really good thing is
Yeah.
you can go as fast as you need to go. You can kind of go at a slower pace if that's what you need. But in the end, it was really helpful. And then, like I say, I think for me, the things that I learned, like never really realized that I wound up having a bunch of psychology courses that I ended up taking through study.com. And I didn't even really, I think informally I give a lot of advice and sit down with a lot of folks and give wisdom and things like that. And people come to me and I'm grateful for that. But I think now taking these psychology courses actually got me even more interested and invested into something like that, to where it's allowed me to really actively see mental health in a different view, and being in
Yeah.
public safety. It's really tied in the two, where public safety and mental health are really a big deal. And it's really been exposed over here the last few years of how big it is. And so now it's just taking those psychology classes have given me some interest to be like, hey, maybe that's something I want to get my master's in or pursue as well. So again, this is giving me the opportunity to want to say, hey, bachelor's is great, but now maybe it's opened the door for something more.
That's awesome. That's really great to hear. Yeah, I love how it applies to your everyday too.
Yeah, yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, I feel like that just makes it so much more like beneficial. Aside from getting the degree,
Yeah,
actually learning something useful while you're
for
doing it.
for sure. Something you can
Yeah,
apply.
yeah. Let's touch on a little bit. Just so you finish your study.com courses, you transfer it to Thomas Edison.
Hmm.
You get your degree from Thomas Edison. What was the Thomas Edison experience like?
So Thomas Edison was I'll say this, study.com did an amazing job setting me up, and I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak solely for me, setting me up to make that transition to Thomas Edison very easy in coursework. I'll be honest, I felt as though I was so prepared that the Thomas Edison classes that I had to take, which was only two, but those two classes, one being my capstone, the other being, I cannot
The
remember,
information literacy?
information literacy class.
Yeah.
But because I had written so many papers, because both of those classes required me to write papers,
Yeah.
I had written so many papers that I felt very confident in doing it. And so it made that transition from study.com to Thomas Edison really, really good. Again, I thank study.com in the way, again, because for most of us in study.com, you've been in school, you started school, you took a pause because life changed things. And
Yep.
now you're having to re-kick and restart that whole brain machine outside of just normalcy of work. And so
Yeah.
now you're going back to this school environment. And I think study.com does a really good way of being able to restart that and get you thinking about things. And then when you make that transition to, for me with Thomas Edison, it made it easy. There's nothing more I can say. I didn't have any really complications because they
Yeah.
did such a good job setting me up.
That's great to hear. I think that's really awesome. So you finished your degree through Thomas Edison. What was that feeling like when you got your diploma, when you knew you'd finished everything to get the bachelor's?
Man, so listen, next to having my children, and in being promoted in the fire department, it was probably one of those top 4 to 5 things in my life. It was one of those feelings. And again, the feeling is it's an accomplishment. I did this. I worked hard to get here. Although my road and my path wasn't a typical, hey, I go to school right after 4 years. I was there for 2, stopped, and then life came. It was just a really good accomplishment. I was super excited. There was a lot of internal joy. And it was just kind of one of those things just looking at. And I remember I get this big old envelope for Thomas Edison. And I wasn't thinking about it. I get in the mail, I open up the mail, and it's my degree. And I'm sitting there like, yeah. And so it sits on my table
Okay.
in my house, on my dinner table now, because it's one of those things. And although my daughters thankfully have used it as a cup holder several times,
Sure.
but that accomplishment there is great. With that being said, I just got a call.
You got to go?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking this time. This was great. This was really awesome.
I
I'll let you go.
appreciate you.
Good luck on the call.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
One of the things that I loved most, I loved everything about this chat with Sim, but he said college is a choice. Knowledge is power. And I think that is really true. And if he's there doing study.com lessons from the back of his fire truck, I mean, how great is that? Like, how amazing is that he was able to do that? So If you want help getting your degree, make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, check out the other videos that we have on this channel. There's a bunch of content on how you can do this just like Sim did. Ustudy.com, work with one of our partner universities, and earn your degree. Good luck.